and very much welcome to this interview. Today we have here at the home of Nibiru, the website, we have the press conference about mind control and human experiments. One of the guests who came specially from Peru to join this conference is you?
John Nicholson.
John Nicholson. We're gonna do a little interview with him because he has a special story to tell, and he also has some strong evidences about what has happened to him. So you are living in Peru right now. Are you a native Peruvian, or where do you come from originally?
No, I come from the north of Scotland originally.
All right.
But I left home when I was very young, so I've travelled a lot. And at the moment I'm actually living in Peru, yes.
Okay, what's the reason why you moved there?
Well, the original reason I moved there was because I'd fallen in love with somebody who was Peruvian, with a Peruvian woman. But the reason why I stayed there, we actually fell out of love. So I stayed on there because of the problem I have. I found out that I could get treatment in Peru much more easily than anywhere in Europe.
So the treatment for the subject we're going to talk about, because you are a victim of human experiments, body experiments, which also have influence on your brain and on your thinking. Can you tell us how did it all start? What is your background? What's your what kind of work did you do before this happened, and what's the story behind it?
Yeah, well, I studied linguistics, and I also learned several languages throughout the years, and I went to work for a company called British Aerospace, and in Saudi Arabia, teaching English to cadets in a military setup, in a military environment. On an RAF base, in actual fact, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and I needed a hernia operation in 1998.
Right.
And my problems began after the hernia operation. The operation was under general anaesthetic, and it turns out that I was implanted with many artifacts during that operation.
How did you find out that there were, after the operation, you had these chips or artifacts, you call them, in your body?
Yes, well, directly after the operation, there were few indications. I would say it was the following year that I began to perceive slight auditory input and tingling to the scrotal skin. These were the first two symptoms, and I didn't relate them to the operation. And then with the years, I think it was 2005, I actually left Saudi Arabia in 2002, so in 2005 the auditory input increased, and I suffered what I now know to be organised stalking between 2005 and 2008 for 3 years. Then later in 2009, the really heavy stuff kicked in. Like, for example, I perceived, and I still do, pulses to the anal regions and the genitalia. Sometimes I get induced rapid heartbeat, which I now know to be on account of a capsule that I have in the aorta close to the heart. And I have other symptoms like involuntary muscle contractions, and virtual sexual abuse, for example, because, well, it's actually not got the same impact now because I had 2 artifacts removed from my left spermatic cord, microstimulators. And this all came about because I decided to have some scans in Peru. The initial scans from magnetic resonance and CAT scans, they didn't really show anything. But right. Then, because I was actually advised by a doctor to try some vascular scans because the symptoms related to pulsations, so she suggested to try a vascular scan, and that's when it all started, because they showed up artifacts in the groin. And these were actually removed last October or November. and well, I actually have the artifacts, and I have I've had enlarged photographs taken by a photographer. And I think the most significant aspect of the artifacts that were removed is that one microstimulator was actually embedded in a clip, in a surgical clip. And since removal of that surgical clip, the tingling in the scrotal skin has disappeared completely. So that is the ultimate evidence that it was done during the hernia operation in Riyadh.
Right, so you also brought some pictures of the X-ray scans where you can see the artifacts. You also have the artifacts with you, which were taken out of your body by another operation, I guess. Before you had the operation, you were in military, working for the military.
I was working in a military environment. I myself was a civilian. I was an instructor teaching English to cadets there.
All right.
But yes, being in a military environment, I was treated for the hernia operation in a hospital nearby.
Yeah. And do you see some relations between your job and what have happened to you after the operation? Do you think there is some correlation between your job before? What's your idea? Why did they put the implants in you?
Why they targeted me? I would say there are several factors involved. I mean, communicating with other people that have the same problem as myself. That generally speaking, people are unsure of why they were targeted. But in my case, I think I have a pretty good idea. I think there are several factors involved. I think, well, the fact that I required a hernia operation is obviously the most significant one, because had I not required this hernia operation, I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in now. But there was the situation with the hernia repair. Then there was the fact that I was in a military environment, because according to my investigations, many victims are taken from military or prison environments. And so there was that part of it. There was also the fact, possibly, that I was not living like a typical expat in an expat compound, in an institutionalized sort of form. I actually used to leave the compound on a daily basis to learn Arabic at the Islamic University, and also to teach English to Arabs in their homes. So I stood out a little bit. So that might have had an effect on my targeting. There are also several other factors. I've been told by doctors in various countries that I have blood which coagulates very quickly, and I have flesh which heals very rapidly.
Right.
And of course I had a car accident in 1981, a very serious car accident which left many scars on my body and a bit of turmoil inside my body as well. So that would have provided a bit of cover for the implants, I'm sure. And just one more point, I was born in 1948, which is when I believe George Orwell wrote the book 1984. So I don't know whether that has anything to do with it, but it's possible.
All right. So you found out after some years that there was something done with you where you didn't knew about, that something was wrong. So you went to the Peruvian doctors and they made the scans and found the artifacts. Yeah. You removed them, but you still have some problems. How is this possible?
Well, yes, because the artifacts that were removed, I mean, I had 5 operations in 5 weeks during October and November of last year, but that was just to remove artifacts from the groin and the right femur and the rectum, those 3 areas. But I have many more artifacts.
So in your whole body there's...
In my whole body, from my head down to my lower leg, I'm just completely riddled with it, basically. I have x-rays and scans to prove that. But it's not that easy to find a surgeon to remove them, so obviously that's why they haven't been removed up to now.
What's the reaction of the doctors? You spoke about this, you showed them, I guess in the first place, when you were just discovered what were happening with you, you went to doctors. How did they react? Did they believe you immediately, or do you have problems to make your story clear?
Yeah, well, I think that's it depends. It's culturally determined, really. It depends on the country. I mean, I've been to England, to Scotland, I've been to Germany, to Peru, to Cuba, many different countries seeking surgery, well, obviously doctor's advice, and with the scans the scanned images that I have from Peru, and advice has varied. The reactions have varied quite a lot. In England, it's just no go. Basically, they don't want to know. I get lied to. The thing is, they probably just think I'm a typical patient, but I've educated myself quite a bit in medicine, and I've investigated an awful lot during recent years on account of my situation. So it's not that easy to lie to me. So I know when they're lying to me, and I can compare what different doctors say to me, and I see that they don't say the same thing. When people lie, they tell different lies. So obviously, I know that there's a lot of reluctance in Europe to deal with this problem. Even in Peru itself, it took me quite a while to find a surgeon who would actually perform surgery.
All right. So, but doctors who lie to you, do you have the idea that they are also involved in this kind of experiments, or why do they have a reason to lie?
Well, I think the reasons vary. I don't think they're involved. No, not at all. Certainly not directly. Maybe not even at all. It's just basically. The reasons could be many why they would lie, but first of all, I think the main reason is that it's an area they know nothing about, and they see that it's not a problem they've dealt with before, so they just basically don't want to have anything to do with it. And
like they cannot tell anything about that, and that's a little bit an ego issue for them. So they're gonna make just a story to have an explanation for something they can't explain. Something like that.
Yeah, it could be. I think that basically they just don't want to get into an area that could be awkward for them or even dangerous. I mean, if we take somebody, let's take the Harley Street doctor, which is probably the one of the best doctors I've been to. If one considers the amount I had to pay to talk to him, I paid £250 for a 20-minute consultation, and after 20 minutes somebody came to the door and said I had to go, that there was somebody else waiting. They were queuing outside, and he's getting £250 each time, so he doesn't even need to perform surgery. So I mean, why should he be interested in somebody like me? I mean, looking at it from a business viewpoint. So that's one thing. I think it's very complex area, this, but I think very few of them are really aware of what's going on, but I think there probably are various, and it varies from country to country. For example, I went to Germany, I went to Munich, and I went to what I learned from the internet to be the top hernia surgeon in the world, the top hernia surgeon in the world, Frau Muschawak. She works and she's got a surgeon in Munich, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. So they sent me to a hospital in Munich, and they didn't find anything either. And I really, this was in July of last year, and that was before the operations in Peru, and I was on the point of giving up, and I decided to go to a plastic surgeon.
And they found it.
The plastic surgeon called Kaspari in Munich. With the first ultrasound, they detected an object pulsing into the testicular area on the left spermatic cord immediately with the first ultrasound scan, and we arranged for surgery the following day, and I went to the clinic the following day, and when I got into the lift, into the elevator to go up, I noticed on the top floor button, which was the 5th floor, that the name Kaspari had been ripped off. Only the C remained. So obviously I started to think, well, there must be something happening here. So I went up, and nobody said anything. They just carried on with the surgery. And the surgeon said to me afterwards, the only problem, it was just a bit of tissue. It was a lipoma, which is a tissue tumor, a tumor of tissue. And he said, it should be okay now that that's been removed, he said. But but I said to him, the scan shows that there's something, a solid object there. No, 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 he said, it's okay. And then later I asked him how much I owed him, and he said 277 euros for an operation at the top plastic surgeons in Germany. So I began to put the pieces together. He knew he hadn't removed the object, and he came to terms with his conscience by just charging me 277 euros. And of course the removal of the name, the significance of that for me was that if you remove the object, the real artifact, Kaspari won't exist. That's it. That's the way I saw it.
Yeah. On the pictures you showed me, there are also some kind of wires which go through your body. What's this about?
The gadgets that were removed, or the artifacts, I just refer to them as the gadgetry. But there is also circuitry there. So there are circuits going all around my body. They've put, according to the X-rays. The X-rays are the only type of scan that I've been able to pick these up on, because they would be microwire or nanowire, which are probably that fine that they'd be too fine for the naked eye to see. But obviously the X-ray magnifies them, and so the evidence on X-ray shows that there are 5-strand microwire arrays or nanowire arrays wrapped around my body and going into the anus and intertwined through the genitalia, supported by a truss. And a radiologist in Cuba confirmed that I have a truss there, and he pointed out the main clue as to why it should be a truss. He showed me an incision, a cut, which one of the microwires is actually cut into the truss, and it hasn't healed. So he said it's obviously not organic, because were it organic it would have healed, and had it not healed, been organic, it would have become infected, and it hasn't become infected because I wouldn't be able to sit down. So he then said that's a confirmation that it's synthetic. He said, explained then that it would have to be synthetic, it would have to be a truss to support all the microwire, because otherwise, without a truss or some form of support, the microwire would cut into the blood vessels and into the flesh, and it would lead to
the body would just work with it and destroy it, probably. Heal it, try to get it out, and with this truss, it is just fixed on a certain place.
Yeah, but it would cut into the blood vessels and create internal bleeding, uncontrollable internal bleeding. Obviously, with a truss, it's the vascular areas is protected. Right. That was his explanation, but I couldn't get that explanation from any radiologist in Europe or even South America. Okay.
You joined today the press conference. There were different victims of mind control and human experiments speaking there. Did you discover or recognize any similarities between their stories and the problems they have, but they experience, and your own experiences?
I think just the only comparisons I could make were general ones, in the sense that we're both suffering from the same condition, but there were no sort of not comparing the detail, because I think that's the way it's been set up. I think they're all the same but different in a sense. I think the kind of suffering, in the sense that there's stalking involved and
sexual abuse also.
Sexual abuse, yeah, obviously.
I asked this question because I see quite similarities between your story. They are different because you're individual persons, but I see in the big picture, I see.
Oh yes, absolutely. That's what I meant by general. I think that's it. But I think that probably the way people are sort of fitted out. I like to use that's the expression I would use, because we are fitted out to be targets, and I think the different ways that targets are fitted out, obviously. They can't be similar, otherwise one would be able to make links and create connections, and that's what the perpetrators are so good at.
And they try to avoid that you make connection with each other and
Exactly.
there's becoming a clear picture.
That's it.
Which
yeah.
would form strong evidence.
Exactly, and of course that goes right from the beginning. For example, the operation, a lot of time was allowed to elapse before I began to suffer, and that's the same thing, so that you don't connect. So, and this is one of their, it's a field they're very good at. They're excellent at doing that sort of thing. But yes, you're right, the virtual sexual abuse is, I think, practically all targets complain of this. There's always this sort of sexual thing involved in it,
and also that the main problems occur during the night. I heard all of them. They describe this.
Sleep deprivation is the basis of this, I think, because I think the Austrian target actually hit the nail on the head when she said that if they hit you then and you suffer from sleep deprivation, they can control you completely, and this is what happens. That's the main thing. And 2 years ago, for example, I was suffering. I mean, I really severe sleep deprivation, but I've developed some strategies and coping skills that help me now. So that's why I believe I'm in control at the moment.
All right. Can you describe what you experienced during the night? What did you experience in the 2 years ago?
Yeah.
When it was the heaviest.
Right, yeah, because beginning of 2009 was when, like I said, that was when the really heavy stuff kicked in, like the pulsations in the groin and the anal region, and that was really difficult. I went 3 nights without sleep. I actually have a photograph I took of my eyes then, because it was just horrendous. I don't think I would have managed the 4th night. It was just it was just so difficult, and I had no strategy because it had just happened, and I hadn't developed any sort of method of countering the problem. Yeah. And then gradually I began to sort of work out ways. Initially I decided I would have to be very tired, so I walked and walked and walked, and because when I walk I don't feel the pulses, so walking is obviously the main thing. So I just walked for miles and got myself really tired, and just purely by fatigue factor I managed to get off to sleep initially. But then later I developed sort of more intricate strategies which aren't very pleasant. Like I have to grab hold of my genitalia and to equalize the pulsations, and stick 2 fingers up my back passage to equalize the pulsations. Yeah. Maybe wrap myself into a ball to try and sort of manage that, just to get off to sleep. That's how ridiculous it is. Because the problem is just during these few seconds when one moves from a conscious state to an unconscious state. Because after falling asleep, it doesn't become a problem, because the electrical activity in the body is reduced to a minimum. So once one is asleep, the impact isn't really there, so it doesn't wake you up.
You don't feel it anymore. Yeah.
No, you can actually sleep then. The problem is actually getting to sleep. Yeah, and then when you wake up in the morning, you have, for example, I have about half a minute when I have perfect peace, because the body is just building up, and then after half a minute when the body builds up the electrical activity again, then it all starts to happen. It's incredible, absolutely unbelievable. Because this is what it's based on. It's all based on electricity.
Yeah. So the main problems you are physically. You get this electric pulses around your sexual area. Let's call it like this. That's also probably what you mean by sexual abuse. Do you feel also some kind of sexual feelings which are not coming from your own, or something like this in this direction? You know.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that the general pulsations that I get, like for instance, at the moment, I'm getting pulsed. I'm getting pulsed, but that has nothing to do with sexual abuse at all. It's just, these are just general pulses, but they can actually stimulate. Like for example, they had the 2 artifacts on the spermatocord. They can use these to stimulate you sexually, which is it's a little bit different. It's quite apart from the general pulsations that are there, which isn't. I think I don't think that's sexually oriented. I think the reason why that happens is because, in actual fact, it is the most sensitive part of the anatomy. There are more nerves in that area than any other part of the anatomy, so it's logical that they would abuse one in that area. Yes. Yeah.
And you also experience certain mental problems or starkings, that you feel that there are certain thoughts coming into your mind, or certain feelings of aggression or negative feelings, because that's also something what's described by victims of mind control.
Yes, I think, well, the physical abuse obviously leads to it has psychological implications, because you see things differently. In a sense, you develop a mental illness. For example, like I refer to it as induced psychosis, where you start connecting events that are unrelated. Well, that's logical, because if things happen to you that wouldn't normally happen to you, for example, something might happen that is just pure bad luck, like happens to everybody. But because you're in this situation, you assume the perpetrators are responsible, and of course this is the type of confusion that
to make you paranoid and stuff.
Absolutely, right? And that's obviously objective. But the more the whole solution is to be aware of it, and then you can counteract it. And now that I'm aware of many things, I have a lot of control that way.
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you find a way to live with it? What's the trick for you because you're looking that you are in a good condition.
Yeah, I am now in good condition.
You found a way how to live with it. What's your secret or your recipe? Because the solution is very important, maybe also for other victims who look at this or see this video.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've got the solution in that sense, but I have developed the capacity to manage. Shall we put it that way? I've developed the capacity to be able to exist daily, because I don't think I'm living, because I'm not able to have a relationship, for example. Yeah. I can't have a relationship. It's just impossible. My relationships just break up, and for various reasons. But I can manage to live. I think the way I live has a lot to do with, for example, I don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 or whatever it is to go to the office or whatever. So I'm not as dependent on things like that. I don't have to work for other people. That's a very important aspect. Yeah. So if I don't sleep well at night and I'm really tired during the day, I can just go for a siesta, and I can balance things out that way. And the work I do, I can do on my laptop, even although my laptop gets sabotaged. And for example, the hotel I'm in at the moment, the signal's been sabotaged, and the whole hotel is suffering because they can't get a signal on the internet.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, honestly, and it happened in Spain, and it happened in Amsterdam. I was in Amsterdam a couple of days ago, and the hotel lost their signal.
So you have the feeling that has something to do with the influence you on your body? You know?
Well, I personally believe that they know I'm here, and they're just making it as difficult as possible for me to communicate. Yeah. And that's one thing that's very easy for them. They have some ploy whereby they can block the signal, so they do it. But there are many things. I mean, this to me, it's a part of passive stalking. I call it passive stalking because I suffered active stalking, organized stalking between 2005 and 2008, when I had 2 intruders. They used to intrude in my house, and they were midget intruders, people of small stature, and I actually have videos. I have video evidence of this. And that was what other targets refer to as organized stalking or gang stalking or cause stalking. And that stopped in 2008. But I still suffer what I call passive stalking. Things like my apartment gets broken into, my bank account gets raided, my suitcase doesn't arrive when I arrive at my destination, or it gets broken, or things get stolen from
too many of these things to be
it's
coincidences.
They're not coincidences. But the other thing they do, of course, because I travel a lot, is they change my seat. I book online and I book an aisle seat, and when I get there, I find I'm in the middle. Would you believe I've been given a middle seat when the plane's been half empty? Right, nobody goes in the middle. But these sort of things happen. Even although they know that when I get there I can change it because the plane's half empty. But that's not the point. The point is they just want, well, first of all, they want to make you know they're stalked. They want to let you know that you're being stalked.
That you're still under control.
That you're under their control, yes, exactly.
We're talking about Day. You're talking about Day. You probably have done some research also. Have you any idea what is behind and what's the reason for all this stalking? Because you manage it very well, others probably not so good. What's the reason in your idea?
Do you mean the reason for the stalking, or the whole targeting?
The whole experiment, the targeting. Do you know there anything? Who are they and what's their purpose?
Well, I just look at the things we have in common. Like I mentioned, even the people that we heard on the radio today. Like I said, much of the detail differs. But the general thing, I mean, for things that are general, organised stalking and electronic harassment go hand in hand. And you mentioned there's sexual abuse involved, there's auditory input involved. So we seem to have these in common. So that would suggest that it's the same. So the perpetrators are common to all of us. I mean, the only thing, obviously, one has to speculate to a degree because they don't tell us who they are.
Course,
so we have to speculate. But the only thing I could say that I'm 100% certain of is that intelligence agents just have to be involved, because even if it's indirectly, because they are the only people that could ensure that it goes unreported in the mainstream media, that it goes undiagnosed or misdiagnosed within the medical establishment, or that it gets ignored by the criminal justice system. These are the three areas that are heavily affected.
That's your own experience also, because
yes.
I guess you went to mainstream media also, and how did they react?
Well, the only ones that haven't actually gone directly to them. I've sent messages by email and letters, and I've never had any replies. And together with the experiences of other people, that would seem to add up. The criminal justice system, yes, I've gone through that process. I've gone to lawyers. I've even gone to barristers in London. The best barristers, but they won't touch it. They won't touch it. And as for the medical establishment, well, nobody's got as much experience as I have of how basically I wouldn't hesitate to use the word corrupt, because it is basically corrupt. Because when a doctor lies to me, now I know when he's lying to me, and it's all there. It's disgraceful, really.
Yeah, I can understand. Do you have a personal mission with all this? What happened to you? Do you see an end of this story, or what? How do you stand in it?
Do you mean my personal story, or the whole thing?
Yeah, the whole thing. And what's your? Do you see yourself as? Do you think you have a mission in this, to get it public, to get it open, to end it, or what's?
I think it's every targeted individual's. I think it should be their objective to try and expose this, because it's it's a form of it's basically what was going on in the Second World War, isn't it? Really,
yeah,
in a sense.
Kind of a Holocaust, but secret.
Well, it's referred to as a silent Holocaust, actually, because many people have taken their lives and ended up in mental homes, and basically cyber Nazis, if you want. It's basically. That's what it is, because humans have proved in history they will do what they can get away with it. They will do what they can get away with, and technology permits them to get away with practically anything, and they're doing it. That's what it amounts to, really.
Yeah, I think it's very good that you're seeing yourself or doing this job to spreading the information, that you came here, and you're a very clear person. So yeah, I think your story is strong evidence for people and can do the whole thing moving. Actually, also what we're doing here now with Niburo to collect different victims and to let them do their story. That people outside also see that there is a correlation and similarities between. It
will promote awareness, definitely, because this is what's required, that the public becomes aware of, and it's very an interesting point, if I could just mention regarding this. I've travelled most of my life, and I've got quite a lot, probably half my life up to now spent in Anglo-Saxon or Germanic cultures, and the other half in Latin cultures, and the difference is quite astounding between what people will actually believe. I mean, in Western Europe and well, in Anglo-Saxon Germanic cultures, I would taking a stab at it, say that 80% would find 80% of the population find it impossible to believe, 20% will take it on board, and it's vice versa in Latin cultures, where hardly anybody disbelieves it. They all take it on board. So
right.
That's quite interesting,
okay.
really.
Yeah, I think they are less rationally brainwashed in this society.
I think so, because of the way they live, and they're out socializing all the time. They're not sort of fixed in front of the television or reading a book that they got at the some store in the high street. No, they're different in that sense. I think that's got a lot to do with it.
All right. Thank you very much for your story.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and very much luck with the rest of your journey in this case. And I hope it will end up soon. I have the feeling we here at Niburo, we know that many changes are coming soon in the future, with also the old power structures, they falling down and they're breaking down, and I guess they are also part of this experiment.
No doubt,
for sure.
Yeah.
So and the end is nearby, and it's good that you're doing this work.
Well, I hope you're right anyway.
Yeah.
Many thanks.
All right, I hope you could get a kind of clear idea of where we're busy with here with the mind control case at Niburo. If you are interested in this, we will bring up more of the stories in the future. The press conference about mind control we had today will also be online, so stay tuned and help spreading the word. Thank you very much for watching.
Many artifacts during that operation.
How did you find out that there were, after the operation, you had these chips or artifacts, you call them, in your body?
Yes, well, directly after the operation, there were few indications. I would say it was the following year that I began to perceive slight auditory input and tingling to the scrotal skin. These were the first two symptoms, and I didn't relate them to the operation. And then with the years, I think it was 2005, I actually left Saudi Arabia in 2002, so in 2005 the auditory input increased, and I suffered what I now know to be organized stalking between 2005 and 2008 for 3 years. Then later in 2009, the really heavy stuff kicked in. Like, for example, I perceived, and I still do, pulses to the anal regions and the genitalia. Sometimes I get induced rapid heartbeat, which I now know to be on account of a capsule that I have on the aorta close to the heart. And I have other symptoms like involuntary muscle contractions and virtual sexual abuse, for example, because, well, it's actually not with the same impact now, because I had 2 artifacts removed from my left spermatic cord, microstimulators.
Hello and very much welcome to this interview. Today we have here at the home of Niburo, the website, we have the press conference about mind control and human experiments. One of the guests who came specially from Peru to join this conference is you?
John Nicholson.
John Nicholson. We're gonna do a little interview with him because he has a special story to tell, and he also has some strong evidences about what has happened to him. So you are living in Peru right now. Are you a native Peruvian, or where do you come from originally?
No, I come from the north of Scotland originally.
All right. What's your what kind of work did you do before this happened, and what's the story behind it?
Yeah, well, I studied linguistics, and I also learned several languages. throughout the years, and I went to work for a company called British Aerospace, and in Saudi Arabia, teaching English to cadets in a military setup, in a military environment, on an RAF base, in actual fact, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And I needed a hernia operation in 1998.
Right.
And my problems began after the hernia operation. The operation was under general anesthetic, and it turns out that I was implanted with but I left home when I was very young, so I've travelled a lot, and at the moment I'm actually living in Peru, yes.
Okay, what's the reason why you moved there?
Well, the original reason I moved there was because I'd fallen in love with somebody who was Peruvian, with a Peruvian woman. But the reason why I stayed there, we actually fell out of love. So I stayed on there because of the problem I have. I found out that I could get treatment in Peru much more easily than anywhere in Europe.
So the treatment for the subject we're going to talk about, because you are a victim of human experiments, body experiments, which also have influence on your brain and on your thinking. Can you tell us how did it all start? What is your background?